APJ specific time zone office hours. This is Matt Vandenbeld here at vCloud Matt. Today I have with me Z House at VMA to Z. Z, you want to say hi?
Hey everybody.
I guess for our APJ friends, it's probably Z as well, isn't it? I'm just trying to. I know for
No,
EMEA it is,
it's
but
probably for Australia. It's probably Zed.
yeah, the Queen's English. Anywho, that aside, today we're actually going to rope Z into actually doing a. We've been meaning to do this in our lab anyway. Set up the latest versions of site recovery as a service. We decided that let's just do it on the stream as well. So we're going to be doing this live. So you'll see the real deal of going through and configuring site recovery from our VMware Cloud instance. In this one's in Oregon, right?
This one is in Oregon, and this
Oregon,
is we'll be connecting to my personal lab. So
which is in Denver, I guess,
correct.
relatively speaking, Denver.
Yep.
So I'll let you maybe give a brief intro of yourself again and take it away if you want.
Yeah, as Matt said, my name is Z House. I work on the same team as Matt. We do all things VMC ultimately. And yeah, also as Matt said, we've been trying to been carving up some time to get this set up so that we can do some testing that we have, and it's been just a little difficult to get it on the calendar and get some time dedicated to it. So it's after hours. It's 5 p.m. for me, so it worked out perfectly. Um, as Matt said, we can see that our SDDC is in US West in my availability zone 2C. We will be connecting this to my lab here at my house in Denver with the layer 3 VPN. I do have some work already done, mainly layer 3 VPN tunnel that we'll see here in a second, route-based VPN. I also have the site recovery VM built on-prem as well as the vSphere replication appliance deployed. We can see both of those here. Recovery. So one of these are things that you will have to do in your own environment. So if you had layer 3 VPN or if you had a direct connect, you would need to establish that connection to your SDDC. You would also need to we would need either a 2012, 2016. I'm not entirely sure if site recovery supports 2019 yet. I do believe it just came out a little while ago, last time I logged into MSDN. But you would need a Windows box to install Site Recovery Manager on-prem, and then also the vSphere replication appliance deployed on-prem. And on the VMC side of things, it's really easy. I've also done that as well. We can actually go through and we can activate a new one. So when you see this here, we'll see that it's active. We can have multiple instances. If you're familiar with Site Recovery Manager in the on-prem world, this would be kind of a many to one or ultimately multiple site recovery instances to the same virtual center. And that's done with the extension key. So if we go to activate a new instance, if you're familiar with the MOB or the Managed Object Browser, this may look a little familiar. Um, the current one that I have is a custom extension key, so that's why it's giving us the option of using the default. You could add one here. We'll just call this Twitch. I'll add an instance. The initial one is going to take roughly about 7 or 8 minutes because that's going to deploy a Site Recovery Manager appliance as well as the vSphere replication appliance. Everything in VMC is taken care of, so you don't need to deploy things. You don't need to register with Virtual Center. That's part of the as a service aspect of VMC, as well as site recovery with VMC. Additional instances, as you saw there, will take roughly, I would say 4 to 5 minutes. When we have multiple instances, you'll be able to see those. There's really no managing it per se from here. You would just deactivate it. There'll be a button to activate the individual instance that you got there. So if we take a look, we can also see that it's being deployed here. There'll be a new one. So if you use the default extension key, just one thing to look at when you look at your SDDC, it'll just be called SRM with no dash on the end. When you activate it with a custom extension key, as you can see there, you can probably guess how it comes out. So it's just a dash, whatever you put in for the extension key. Also, if you have not been working with site recovery, these keys need to match on both sides. So if you do the default extension key on-prem, so when you go through the setup, it's very similar, but it's obviously not a web page and as a service as site recovery and VMC is. Um, but it will ask you for that. I will say one caveat is that the installer is a little on the vague side. It's not as clear as the add-on in VMC. It is just looking for the additional piece on the end. You do not need to type in the entire com.vmware.vcdr dash. I've done that a couple times. Speaking from experience, you will end up with something that's not usable and you'll have to unregister it. Let's see here. Am I missing anything, Matt? Before I
No, I think you're rolling.
okay.
There's a lot of stuff coming up with the site recovery as well in our future releases. Um,
And one quick thing, because I know the product team will thank me for it. So if we go to there is a promotion going for site recovery right now. Let me see if I can find this here. We can probably put this in chat. If we look at site recovery, right here, 90-day free promotion, up to 200 VMs. So if you have an SDDC and you want to do testing, or maybe you already have site recovery and you just want to take advantage of the promotion, it is there. So whether you're a new customer that is signing up for site recovery, whether you're an existing customer that's already using it, you can sign up for it. It is limited. I believe it runs out the first part of August. Probably says if we click this link, but I don't want to delve.
did we lose your audio there, Z?
So sorry, Matt, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't hear you talking there for a little bit. So,
Oh, I just got a pop-up saying my internet was unstable.
oh,
Sorry about that. Where did we leave off? What
uh,
did we miss out on?
it's good enough.
Okay.
We're fine. We're fine. I was just worried I lost you. So,
Okay. Nope. I'm still here. That's also a good point. So we did have a what do they call it? The bomb cyclone or whatever in Denver yesterday, and I was without power for about 5 hours. So hopefully it's clear skies outside right now. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. Um, anyway, we took a slight detour there. Apologies, as Matt prefaced when we started this here. This is live. This isn't. We're not rehearsing this or anything. This is just kind of going through a setup. Um, so prerequisites, private connectivity. That's another key point of site recovery. You cannot do this over the internet. So you can deploy an SDDC and not connect it back to on-prem. Ultimately, that is just making Virtual Center available on the internet. You cannot do that with site recovery. So we need some form of private connectivity, whether it's a layer 3 VPN or a direct connect, in case anybody is wondering about that. So as I said, we do have a layer 3 VPN that's set up here. We do need some additional firewall rules, and we can go through and set those up. So the vSphere replication appliance, there's only one. So if we go back and if we look at Virtual Center, we'll see we only have our single VR and we have our two SRM instances for the different extension keys. Um, the VR appliances will scale. So once you go beyond 300 VMs, we will scale out to a second one that allows us to support up to 1,000 protected VMs in site recovery on VMC. It will not scale beyond that. You can't scale these manually like you would do on-prem. So that is something new that came out, I think, in the last 2 to 3 months or so. Um,
so that's also one of the purposes we're doing this test for is we
yes.
want to validate how many of the virtual machines we can replicate with that one instance. So,
Yep. Yeah. So we wanted to see, yeah. So a good point. We were part of the test we want to do is to see what that scale out looks like. So I don't might be able to find a PowerShell script to do this live, but I don't know that we'll be able to demo
no,
it
I was just going
later
to say
or
that
not.
that might be something for a future webinar
Yeah.
or office hours because yeah, we have to probably scale up
Yeah.
our SCDC as well. But that was the impetus behind a lot of this work.
Yeah. So what you'll need is firewall rules. So what kind of the path that I was going is vSphere replication, we will not need anything. So even when that scales, it is a group. So if we look at this, if we look at management groups, we see vSphere replication. So this management group itself, this grouping will change. We'll have the additional vSphere replication IP in there. So you will not need to make any additional firewall rules when that happens. If you add a new instance, however, if we look at this, you'll see that it says STDZ. So this is only to my existing SRM instance. So if we wanted to add a new one,
And just while you're doing that, Z, another thing I mentioned is the we're still working on getting the firewall rules accelerator into the NSXT interface. That was
yeah,
something that was really nice in the V interface. Was there was a drop down saying, "Hey, which service would you like to enable?" and it would give you the correct prompts and assist you through it. And that's still coming
yeah.
with part of our releases. I'm not exactly sure exactly when it's coming. I never try to give dates anyway, so soon trademark.
Yes, yes. So as you can see here, it's a little easier to see. So you can see that we have our STDZ, we have our Twitch one. So if we wanted to create a new firewall rule, you would point it to this one, and that's what would allow the connectivity to it. We do need inbound and outbound. So you can see that we have a virtual center outbound in ESXi. They're not in the same order. I apologize. Out and in, and VR out and in. So my group I've just created. Sometimes I call this just RFC 1918. It's just the private IPs, the 10s, the 172s, and here it is. Sorry, missed it. Um, so just the 1918 address space. So I'd created that. So once we have that, our site recovery activated in VMC, once we have our site recovery manager Windows-based install on-prem and our vSphere replication appliance deployed and registered with Virtual Center, we can actually come over to our Virtual Center. And this can be done either from your on-prem Virtual Center or this can be done from the VMC Virtual Center. The pairing operation it doesn't matter. It's a pairing, so yeah, it just doesn't matter. Um, so we open up site recovery. I have already, I think I've gone through the pairing. We'll see here. Let me open this up. I don't remember how far I got earlier today. Okay, so I have. So we can actually, let's just do this. We'll break it. So this is what you would see after you've got everything deployed. You would see the same type of view on-prem as you see in VMC. This is all H5 client. So if you're using the Flash client on-prem, it will redirect you to the H5 SRM view. Just one thing to be aware of. If you're still using the Flash client on-prem, I highly recommend using the H5 client. Makes everybody's life a lot easier. So some of this stuff here, if you're familiar with Site Recovery Manager, if you used it in the past, this is just the site pairing. So obviously, if this was backwards, if we were going from on-prem into VMC, we would supply our VMC Virtual Center FQDN because it's a PSC and VC all-in-one appliance. Ironically, that's the same way I have my lab set up. And instead of administrator at vSphere.local, it would be cloud admin at vmc.local, and then the password that you can get out of your cloud services portal. We can see both of vSphere replication and site recovery. We want to do both of them, not just one or not just the other. And that'll kick off the pairing. That'll allow us to start building out our resource mappings and start protecting VMs. Give this a second here. Okay. So we can see both sides information about both. Excuse me. Um, So if you, again, if we'll kind of gear this towards if you've never used site recovery before, so that there's a concept of resource mappings. You can see all the different resources, folders, networks, resource. I guess it's kind of a generic resource mapping. That's actually the compute resources.
Now, on the flip side of that, Z, if you are familiar with SRM, this is exactly the same.
Yep. Yeah. So site recovery, or there's a couple different names. So site recovery, SR as a service, DR as a service. On the VMC side is site recovery manager. If in the on-prem world. Um, so yeah, if you're familiar with it, like I said, the one big change. So if you're still using the 6.5 branch of vSphere replication or array-based replication, because in the on-prem world you do have array-based replication. Um, and if you're using just the older or SRM 6.5, the UI is going to look different. That changed from 6.5 to 8, and then we're now on 8.1. Um, so some of these here, I get questions a lot on what is this automatic, right? I think most of us want to or appreciate an easy button. So the one thing to note on this is that the names have to match. So it's really just looking at, what do we see on our VMC Virtual Center? What do we see on our on-prem Virtual Center? If we have names of like prod, dev, test on both of those, then it's just gonna, there's not a lot of intelligence to it. It's just gonna create a mapping to those. Um, I guess if you have a lot, like I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 of them, and the names are identical, you could go through the automatic. I prefer to go down the manual mapping, at least that way. Usually with auto, you have to kind of check over everything anyway. So and at least in my experience, you still end up using about the same amount of time. I have not prepared anything on the VMC side, so we'll just do the manual one. So if we look at this, so this is networks. So let's take this guy and we'll map him to, all right, I haven't created any networks. Live, I have not created any segments. Oh no, I did. Site recovery 101. So sorry, I just didn't see it there. Oh,
So that's actually kind of a handy thing you just showed there too, because actually oddly enough a common question I get too is how do I create a port group? Um, and so
yeah.
in the old
Um,
interface in V it was called logical switches, right? And then now it's called network segments. So
Yeah, so if you've been a consumer of VMC in the past, and you either have or had or have seen an NSX-V based SDDC, so that was done through Virtual Center, obviously based on NSX-V, and so all new SDDCs are going to be based on NSX-T, and that is not done through Virtual Center. So these are opaque switches, if you're familiar with NSX-T, and that is done through the CSP or the Cloud Services Portal. So you do that each SDDC. You can give it a name. We can go ahead and add one here. Um, so the three different options or three different types you have here. So routed, just like the name sounds. So this is going to be a routed segment. If you're doing route-based VPN, or if you're doing a direct connect, when you create this, we will automatically advertise this new segment and this new route over either L3 VPN or the direct connect via BGP. If we're doing an extended network, if we're doing, so it'd be L2 VPN. If we're doing the on-prem standalone edge client, you would first of all create your L2 VPN, and then you can go through and add the L2 segments manually. You can also do that with HCX. Won't touch too much on that. It's a whole nother topic. And then there's a concept of a disconnected. This is fairly new. This is also mainly for HCX. If the on-prem environment went away, I do have one customer that's looking at using this. Actually, I talked to him today. So you can just create a disconnected one. So it's ultimately an isolated segment. So you still have to provide a gateway and a prefix length for it. This would give you the ability to create it or turn it into a routed segment. But ultimately, if you want to think about it, it's an isolated VLAN in the on-prem world. The LIF is not going to be attached to the edge. We're not going to be advertising any routes for it.
well, also just jump in here too, so to add a couple points. So the disconnected was also added for the testing of a site recovery as well, I believe, to give it a network that you could attach virtual machines to that didn't talk anywhere. a test network, as it were. And another thing I'd like to outline here too is you may notice what's missing in this. So this is an M6, the latest and greatest, and we don't have the default compute network created anymore. And
Yes.
a lot of that was for the exact reasons you just brought up of it's automatically advertised once you connect a direct connect or anything to it. And we picked, and actually, no, he doesn't have it here. The default one was
Yeah.
192.168.1.0, which bumped into a lot of people's um, either on-prem or some default stuff. So, I think it's as of M6 that has been removed now, and that was kind of impetus from our team to try to prevent some of these problems from happening. So, I just wanted to bring that up while we were looking at this screen as well.
Yeah. So here we can do. We'll do a little show and tell since this is a live one here. Show. Okay, so you can see here, we minimize this a little bit so that we can see all of our goodies. So this is my VTI, my VPN tunnel interface, where my connection is going over. So I only have one, which is VTI 0. So you can see, so this is my management subnet that's coming that we're learning across there. Um, this is the SR101 that was already created, and you see that this Twitch segment is not being advertised. I think this is what it was called before
Yeah, it was
security,
something very similar to that.
or I
Yeah.
guess network one, whatever the name was.
Yeah.
Names, not super relevant, but this was the IP space that it used, 1.192.168.1.1 for the gateway. So if we save this, there you go. Same thing, just since we're doing kind of the demo here, I like to see things live. So if we change this from a route or disconnected to a routed, the same, I imagine everybody can already imagine what's going to happen. There we go.
So
So
obviously you can see that this may have caused some issues with some environments when they plug their direct connect in. Um,
yeah,
also for customers out there that may be on not the I think everything's up to M6 now, but um, if you're having some issues around some of that network stuff, that'd probably be why. So something to
yeah,
check out. But like I said, we don't have it by default anymore.
yeah. And we kind of took a left turn in Albuquerque, which is ironic because I'm originally from Albuquerque, but um, that's one thing to note. So also when you're doing layer 3 VPN or when you're doing direct connect, it would be advisable to do route prefixes or route filtering on-prem. I do have one customer where, funny enough, it actually has kind of made it difficult because they're in a change freeze and we need to allow a new network in. But some customers do not do that. So whatever they learn just gets redistributed back into their corporate network. So if we have, I would say that this is fairly common. Um, I mean, it's obviously common in the home world, but in the enterprise, I guess depending on the size, it may or may not be, but it can definitely cause some problems. So when you set these up, I would control what's going to be redistributed into your network. All right. So we'll focus back where we were. So we're creating a mapping, SR101. We're just mapping this here. These networks don't match, different IP space, but anyway, it's going to give you the option to create a reverse mapping. I would recommend, if you're using site recovery as a data center evac tool, which is also another use for it. It's not just for DR. The reverse mapping, you don't need to do it. Uh, all it's going to do, it's just going to create the exact same mapping, but in reverse, like the name would imply. I would check the box and do it anyway. No matter what you're doing, it's just going to save you if you fail it over and then decide you need to reprotect and fail back. Um, you're going to have to do this. So, test network isolated. Do we want to connect it to something real? We'll just leave it isolated, complete. Um, so if I had done this, if I had left it automatic, it wouldn't have detected anything because I have nothing in my on-prem world that's called SR101, and I have nothing in VMC that matches VLAN 900 VSS. So just to kind of touch on the automatic piece. Folder mappings, just what it says. So these are virtual center constructs. On the VMC side, it should be noted if you have not used VMC in the past. So the management VMs is really, it's just a view. excuse me, all of those things that are in there are only, it's virtual center, site recovery, visa replication, NSX manager, edges, and controllers. It's just a view. You can't power it off. You can't open the console to it. You can't deploy VMs to it as well. So if you were to select this and try to add, um, I'm not, if we go through the end, it's not going to let us add this. It may let us add the mapping, but when we go to actually fail things over, it's not going to work. So um, we would need to dump it to either the workloads folder. You can create things either in workloads or in templates, and you can create subfolders in these. Just one thing to note: do reverse mapping, resource mappings. So this is the compute resource. In VMC, same type of construct. So we have resource pools. The management resource pool is for, you probably guessed it, the management components. You cannot deploy anything to it. So you would need to select the compute resource pool. You do have the ability to create child resource pools under this if you are a fan of that in the on-prem world. So you cannot select the cluster at the top level. Reverse mapping. Oh, look at that. We got an error. My Zoom window's in the way.
So for anybody that's wondering if we're doing this live, obviously.
Do not hold privilege. Resource pool. Compute resource. Interesting. Let's try this again. Why did I not? Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Well, that's going to be interesting. Why? Why do I not? Hmm. Okay. Well, let's continue on here. That is going to pose for actually demoing to test this. But in the sake of trudging forward here, um, storage policies. So if you have vSAN or vVols on prem and you make use of storage policies, this is new. I think 8.1, maybe 3 or 4 months. So you can actually map your storage policies. Like I said, if you have vSAN on prem, VMC is all vSAN based. So you can create policies. We can create one of these. I do not have vSAN on prem, but we'll just do this guy. This guy. You know what? Here, let's do this since we have matching names. Um, Here you can see it's just name matching. Which ones do you want to add? We will just do this guy. We'll add our reverse mapping. Placeholder data stores. So again, if you're not familiar with site recovery, so what'll happen if you think of, I'm holding up my right hand and my left hand here. So on the left hand side, we'll have VMC, and on the right hand side, we'll have on-prem. So let's say that we're protecting, we have an on-prem infrastructure and we want to protect on-prem and use VMC as the target. So our right hand would be called the protected site, and our left hand would be called the recovery site. Um, and on the recovery side, where those VMs are, they're just placeholder VMs. So when you look at it, you'll actually see a different little icon on the VM. So you'll see this here. It will look similar to the VR appliance. So it's managed. It'll actually show. You can see it's managed by VR management. I think when we protect the VM, it'll actually say SRM. So on our left hand, on the VMC side, on our recovery side, we need some place to store those VMX files ultimately. That's what a placeholder data store is. In VMC, we only have a single data store since this is vSAN, which is a little bit of a tongue in cheek because we actually have two, but it's just logical because it's the same data store on the back end. It's just broken up for permissions purposes. So that's what placeholder data stores are. We have to do these. This isn't a mapping. This is you do this on each side. So workload data store, add. We can see that we have more errors. Um, we have this selected here for our VMC side. I bounce over to my on-prem. I already have placeholder data store. Interesting. Um, hmm, hmm. You know what? Let me pause sharing here real quick, so you guys aren't going to see this. Give me 1 second and see if I can't get around this so that we can demo. I guess we can take, while I'm pulling this up, I'm not super good at talking and typing and doing a bunch of other things at the same time, but Matt, I don't know if we have any questions on Twitch or anything, or on
No,
Zoom.
no, not as of yet. We did get a cap dropped in there when we got an error, which I actually personally enjoyed. Um, so I appreciate that feedback. Um, yeah, so if anybody's got any questions, obviously we want to keep this interactive as possible and put this in many ways and do whatever, just demonstrate kind of whatever guys want to do. And again, this is doing everything live, and we're doing this to kind of an on-prem distro or on-premises lab. So yeah, we're always live and learn, and this is why we do things like this so that we can figure it out for everybody else.
This is why we do what we do, right?
Exactly. Um, but yeah, it's I haven't seen that particular error before, so it's kind of very interesting. I don't know if something maybe changed on the permission side. Um,
Yep.
which
No, it's we'll have to look into this. So, all right, let me clean this up.
the other thing to comment on now, because of a little time, is this could also be done from SDDC to SDDC. You don't need to do it between an on-prem. So if you're completely out of the data center game but still want DR, that's still also an option for you.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So, you can do SDDC to SDDC. Um, we do have customers that are doing that. So protecting from east to west, west to east. Um, uh, you know, different, obviously different region to different region. It's also a good time, I think, to bring up some of the caveats around that. So while you can do it, if you have a direct connect, either in either one of your SDDCs, what ends up happening is we need to route back to on-prem. So we can't go direct, right? So if you're doing SDDC to SDDC, we would establish an L3 VPN across the two. That's just going to be for the site recovery to talk to each other, the SRM appliances. Um, from vSphere replication to ESX, or sorry, I guess more appropriately from the ESX hosts to vSphere replication, when we're going from, left to right. You guys can't see my hands. I'm over here kind of doing the hand dance. Um, that's direct communication. So if you think about this, the ESX hosts are EC2 instances, right? Um, that's That's no more. That's literally what they are, right? It's not like actually or figuratively. They're bare metal EC2 instances.
Yeah, just to clarify that this is bare metal. This is not like a virtualized thing. This is a
Right?
hardware
Yeah,
hardware.
correct, correct. Yes, correct. Yeah, I know. Yes, bare metal EC2 instances. And when you attach a direct connect, so if you take your VMC hat off, and if you are thinking just native AWS and you attach that direct connect, those instances, those private IPs are now routed over the direct connect. There's no way to change that. That's how it is, right? Same thing happens in VMC because the underlying infrastructure is AWS. So we have some diagrams. I don't have anything readily available, but what would have to happen if you have an east and a west SDDC direct connect to either one or both. You would have to route the ESX traffic from the ESX hosts to the vSphere replication, back to on-prem, back over the direct connect to the other SDDC or the L3 VPN. Not ideal, but it's a limitation of what we have, and how all the technologies work together. So
So, actually, going to take this opportunity as well as you started to jump in on you here, but the I don't know if he's the newest member of our. Actually, no, he's not the newest member of our team anymore. Somehow he already skipped over that. But we have Clement joining us. Clement, did you want to say hi? Actually, I haven't talked to Clement yet myself. But did you want to say hi to everybody out there? Give us a little bit of your background, who you are, what your region is, and just a little
Sure.
info about yourself.
I guess first of all, hi Matt. And I don't think I've spoken to Zed either. Or it's Zed here.
Well, that answers that question. See, it is said over in APJ.
yep,
Hi Z.
yep.
But yeah, I've worked in VMware for 3 years now in the PSO organization. My main focus, I guess, up till now is really just NSX. So I worked on quite a few projects delivering NSXV designs and deployment of such, and also a little bit of NSXT in recent times, and another project recently on PKS as well. So now I've joined the customer success team, and yeah, looking forward to it.
So where is it you're based out of?
Sydney,
Sydney. Okay, so
Australia.
he's you're our first architect, I believe, in the APJ side of the world. So for those that are watching the APJ office hours, he will most likely be the CSA assigned to you. So
Yeah.
Yep, great. Looking forward to it. It's. I can see that within this region, it's starting to ramp up. We're starting to see quite a lot of traction. New customers looking to, I guess, get some value out of what VMC can deliver, and yeah, it's good to see that we're starting to see some motion.
excellent. So just to catch Clement up, we're working on setting up site recovery for our lab, and running into a little bit of fun. But Z was just going over some of the host stuff. So
Okay, I won't interrupt further.
No worries, not an interruption at all. So yeah, so with SDDC to SDDC, that's one of the caveats. And I don't believe that there's going to be a workaround or any other solution to it. It's like I said, it's how the AWS infrastructure works, and we're built on top of that, so we have to play by the same rules.
now to add to that a little bit as well, if you don't have a direct connect, you can just set up a VPN straight between the two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So and so if let's say you want to move from one region to another, it's not a permanent, because again, we have some customers that use site recovery as a migration tool. If you're just moving and you have the option to disconnect the direct connect, you can get around that as well. So I guess those are the two options. You have to route it through on-prem, or you have to disconnect the direct connect. Okay, so let's see here. We log back in. I've circumvented some things here. Let's see if we can get this to work. This should work. If this doesn't work, then we have bigger problems. Voila.
Success. There we go. See, that's what they call us, customer success. Right?
Yes. Yes. I'm just gonna glance over what I've done. Some astute viewers may be able to tell, but we will just continue on and leave it in the background. So we have all of our resource mappings, and I guess I should stop calling them resource mappings because we're using that here. But that's what they are. They're resource mappings. So you have to have these set up ahead of time. You can't just go through and start replicating things and then expect to fail them over. You can set up a replication ahead of time and go back and do this later. So if you have a lot of mappings, a lot of networks that you need to go through, and you have a bunch of large VMs, you can get that kicked off ahead of time. But before you can actually fail anything over, this has to be in place. as with most things, there's a couple different ways you can go about creating a new replication. We'll touch on a couple of these here. I cannot do it from this side, so if we come over here, let's say we want to. You can right click. My zoom bar is perpetually in the way. Applications up here. Forward and reverse. Oh, I may have lost you guys for a second there.
Yeah, you blipped for a second, but we got back up.
I don't know what's happening here. So all right, so forward and reverse replications. This is a little tricky. I get this always messed up in my head. I don't know which way forward, since we're connected to the VMC side. Forward replication should be from VMC to on-prem. Let's see if I'm correct here. It is. So I have no VMs in VMC, so I cannot configure a forward replication. So we have to do a reverse replication. If I was, again, it's backwards. If I was logged into on-prem, it would be different. Let me grab a small VM here. Can I search for these? So if we had multiple pairings, you would see those here. Obviously, we only have one. We only have one VR appliance. So if you do cross that 300 threshold, you can leave it auto. I would say, there's probably no harm in it unless you have maybe some particularly large VMs or some VMs with some excessive rates of change or high change rates. You would be able to specify it and select VR1 or 2. We only have one here, so there's not much difference. Our target data store, workload data store, the vSAN data store, touched on a little bit before. It's on the back end, it's the same vSAN, but it's been separated out into two logical for permission reasons. So the vSAN data store is quote unquote where the management components live. So you can't, delete your virtual center or create a new VM there. Again, even though it's the same underlying vSAN infrastructure. I don't know, infrastructure doesn't sound right. So you can configure your RPOs. If you are familiar with site recovery, but you've been doing array-based replication, right? So your array may be able to do a 1-minute RPO or 30-second RPO, depending on the links between the two. Sorry. With vSphere replication, the lowest RPO that we can do is 5 minutes. Can't set this any lower. That's just based on the technology. So one thing to keep in mind if you're going from array-based to vSphere-based replication. Point-in-time instances. I had one customer that was working through this. This is a little new to me. These are ultimately snapshots. There's some caveats around it. I would need to go back and look at my notes, but I think at the high level, let's see what this little bubble here says. This little bubble covers exactly what my notes were going to say. So you have point-in-time instances, but when you actually do a recovery, those snapshots, which are what the point-in-time instances are all collapsed into one. So go through here. If we had guest quiescing, so if we had tools installed, we could do that, and then compression. So we would send fewer bytes with the cost of higher CPU overhead. If you're adding something, so we have no protection groups, so there's nothing to select. So we'll add a new. Persona is not on, so
I was actually going to make a persona joke as well.
So I'm a little, I don't know, OCD. There's probably some other medical term for it, but all of my things end up being named the same. Like VSS, I still have a standard switch in my lab. I do also have V switches, which are appended with a DPG, distributed port group. So one thing to note. So here we go. So we can see we're adding our replication, our vSphere replication is being auto-assigned. Just a little default summary page. We'll click on finish. Let this guy come up here. So if you are not familiar with vSphere replication, oh, lovely, more errors. Unresolved devices. What do we got here?
Do you have a CD in the drive?
Unresolved devices. That's, I don't know. I grabbed a VM. I don't even know which one it is. It may be, I think it was, did I do util or utility? Util. This may not be. Oh, I'm on a different port group. That is probably why. Oh, there you go. There's my out of control naming. So we're going to skip over that warning. I'm pretty sure it was because it was attached to a network that was not mapped, which is good, right? So you can see what happens if you do not have a resource mapping. Same thing would happen if it was a data store, if it was the compute resource, or there was a resource pool, individual host or cluster, so on and so forth. You should get the idea. So if you're not familiar with vSphere replication, you may be wondering, well, why is it showing not active, right? Refresh, not active, not active. For vSphere replication to initiate, the VM has to be powered on. This is the kernel level. Don't know the details on the exact details why it has to be powered on, but at the end of the day, the VM has to be powered on, or replication is not going to start. And starting is not the correct way to say it either. If it's powered on, it will replicate. You power it off, replication stops. I'm sure it's in a document somewhere. So hopefully we don't get any specific questions on why, because I cannot answer those right now. All right. There you go. Little bubble here. It's a pretty small VM. I do have the fiber internets, as the young kids say these days. So it's pretty fast. Not as fast as I would like. So while this is replicating, if we come back over here and we look, it's not showing up yet. All right. You'll be able to see that little icon that I was talking about. I guess it's not as fast as I would expect. All right. Well, we'll let that replicate. It'll trickle through in the back end. Let's see, what should we talk about here next while that's going? Configuration issues. This is stale. Oh man, that's useful. Mapping. Oh, my folder mapping's missing. Where's this guy at? He's just. All right. So minus the configuration errors or the missing mappings, you do need to, once the VM has been replicated, so while that's going in the background, and once it's been added to a protection group, you do have to configure it. If you have multiples, you can obviously select all, do a configure all VMs. If you want to do, if you just added one to say an existing protection group, you can just click on configure protection. So this really you're just going to go through and review where it's going, right? So we see that our protected site, which is coming from my lab or on-prem, my recovery site, which is VMC, is going to workloads. Um, you can specify a different one if you want to not follow the default, or let's say we had multiple mappings. We can see our resource pool. So on the protected side, it's a cluster. Recovery site is an actual resource pool. Hard drives being replicated. Our CD-ROM is not connected. And we can see that we're mapping from a VSS, so the icon changes a little bit, VLAN 900 to Site Recovery 101. Okay, it's really just a review. Make sure that it's set up the way that you want it. There we go. How's this guy coming along? Oh, that was faster.
And again, I just want to reiterate, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can definitely put it into the chat, or put it to us on Twitter. Yeah, you can even ask Clement any tough questions, seeing as he's new.
You can ask Clement all the tough NSX questions. I am just enough to be dangerous. Maybe a
Thanks,
slightly
guys, for putting me on the spot. Great.
No worries. That's I don't know. That's the way I learned the best. Tough questions. So here's a little icon. This has been interesting. Sometimes it is a lightning bolt. If you've used site recovery in the past, for some reason I think it went away. I don't think it's there anymore. It's just this managed by. So if we look at it, you can see managed by. Look at that. I was correct. It specifies our unstable internet again. You guys still got me?
Yeah, you blipped for a second, but we got you back.
So you can see that it's managed by. So used to be a little lightning bolt icon. It was the site recovery. I think that is no more. Um, so this is the placeholder. You can see it's not taking up the placeholder VM itself is not taking up storage. Obviously, the replicated VMDK in the backend is consuming storage, but it's not reflected here until we actually do a failover.
I think the lightning bolt was an old VMware infrastructure navigator thing.
Um, yeah, I know it seems like it's changed. So I've actually been doing site recovery for 2019 for 11 years now. I was part of the original beta back in 2008. It's come and gone from version to version. So um, okay, so we are sunk. If that's the correct, how would you say that?
Synced?
We have synced. We have
Synced.
sunk.
I think it's synced, not sunk.
No.
Sunk sounds negative. Synced sounds positive.
Thank
We have saying, yeah, I don't know. Our
one of them.
our replication is complete, needless to say. So we can see somebody who's good at math could figure out how long it took and how fast my internet is. Like I said, not fast enough. We can see a summary. Took not quite 5 minutes, 600 megs. So now that this is there and it's replicated, let's see here. Let's do this. We'll just do console. No, we're going to do remote console. Web console's horrible. I'm on a loaner laptop. No VMRC. So we will suffer with the web console. All right. All right. So just a little example, kind of showing that there's no sleight of hand here. Okay. So we've got our, just created that file. You guys just watched me log in. We'll go and log out. We're going to close this because we don't need it anymore. So we'll come to our recovery plan. So protection group is grouping of VMs. Recovery plan is you can have multiples inside of there. So we will select our Twitch recovery plan. We can look at how many VMs are in there. We can look at what protection groups are part of this recovery plan. Some of the things that you can do is you can set, not actually, I use that word too much, apologies. You can set priorities. So 1 through 5, if we look at our protection group, sorry, is it I'm in the wrong place? Recovery steps, sorry. Um, we can set priority. Default priority is 3. So let's say, there's only one VM in here, but the age-old example. So we want probably our DNS servers to come online first, and then Active Directory, and then maybe any firewall appliances. Maybe group 2 would be our SQL servers, and maybe anything else infrastructure related. So you can go through and you can configure all of that so that they come up in the appropriate order. We only have one VM here, so there's not much to show. You can also do scripts, so that can be just a manual intervention. So when you run this, it'll pop up and say, hey, update routing, right? So if you don't have stretch layer 2, we need to update routes for our segments to go from on-prem to VMC or vice versa. Just something to pop up. You can also execute scripts inside of the VMs. You can change IP addresses if you're not doing L2 VPN. So like in this example, when I fail this VM over, it will not have network connectivity because we're in 2 different IP spaces. So some of the things that you can do. So we will go ahead and there is the option to test. One of the things with site recovery is you could test all day, every day, 5 times a day, 10 times a day, just depending on how much time you had and how much bandwidth you wanted to consume ultimately. So it will leave your VMs running on-prem in the on-prem environment. And it will bring them up in a bubble. So if you remember that when we went through the network resource mapping, it asked how we wanted to handle test. Do we want to just isolate them? So what it will do is it will create just a standalone isolated segment. Actually, let's test it, because I do not know how it's going to do that. If you think about just like a standard vSwitch, I'm not sure what it's going to do with NSXT. So let's have a little fun here. Oh, we only have 3 minutes left, so we'll go ahead and test it. 5-minute RPO. If I had touched that file in my on-prem, I talked long enough. Apologies. It may have already synced it. Since we're doing a test, we're going to go ahead and kick off one more sync. I'll finish it. You can follow along. So it's kicking off the initial sync. It's all done because there's almost nothing to do. Configure test networks. I don't know what it's going to do here. I'm kind of interested. Oh, so it does. So there you go. Creates a standard switch. So in this environment here, this is a 1-node SDDC. So our test environment by default, since it's only 1 node, all the VMs that we recover on it, they're all going to be able to talk to each other. Obviously a 1-node SDDC is first and foremost not production, because it's just a single point of failure. But if we had 3 or 4 nodes or more, that isolated network. So when you fail those VMs over, if they're on different hosts, they're going to have no way to communicate. So one way to do that would be the disconnected state, right? So that segment, our opaque switch, like this guy, is it's not VXLAN and NSXT, it's Geneve. And if I said that wrong, Clement can correct me. Not to put you on the spot again, but that segment is going to be stretched across all the hosts, so they would be able to communicate. But you would have to specify that when you go through the configuration. So let's see here. In progress. So this is going to, one of the things, if you do not have VMware tools installed on your VMs, you need to exclude this so it does not wait for tools. Otherwise, it will fail. The timeout's 5 minutes. At a minimum, it's just going to make either your test or your recovery plan last longer. It's also going to add some additional cleanup steps in there when it's waiting for this. If you don't have tools, I would put them on your VM. It's also a requirement. So if you're doing IP customization or changing IPs from on-prem to VMC, or ultimately whenever you fail over, you have to have tools installed. If you have an older version of tools, IP customization with site recovery 8.1, requires tools version 10, 10.x. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. That's ultimately what I'm trying to say is if you're going to do site recovery and you're going to do customization, VMware tools should be up to date. So this VM does have tools. I don't know why it's taking so long. I do follow my own advice. Wrong password. So there's our little demo showing that our file was replicated.
I need to get a ta-da sound effect or something.
The Windows 95 ta-da. I like that.
Oh yeah, I gotta get that.
I like that. So we are at the top of the hour. I don't know if we have any questions. I don't see anything on Twitch. I don't know if there's anything on Zoom or not. So if you guys got any questions, I can stick around for a little bit. But if not, thank you guys for listening, and I'll let Matt close us out.
Yeah, so it doesn't look like we have any questions. Again, if you have questions when you're watching this on YouTube later, we'll put it up onto YouTube. You can email us at cloudcs@vmware.com. That email goes to a distribution group, and we can get to it right away. If you have any comments, suggestions, any of that kind of stuff, we're definitely open to feedback. We want to really keep this as interactive as possible. We're not, tech marketing or any of those other kind of groups. As you can see, we do everything live, and we do it for real, and we battle through some things sometimes, and we just want to make sure that we show the value and stuff and the real world out to the customers. And maybe I'll put Clement on the spot, because I put the EMEA guys on the spot earlier this week. So maybe we'll let Clement close this out with some closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Okay, well, thanks again, Zed, for the wonderful demonstration. So I will certainly go back and watch the beginning of it, since I actually missed it, had a conflicting customer meeting, unfortunately. But this is actually something that is going to be a big use case for VMC together with all the others. So so thank you guys. Thank you, Matt, for organising all of these things. They're going to be really informational for everybody who are starting off on their journey to VMC.
Yeah. And I just want to add one quick thing, and I think Matt had one more thing to say. So if you guys have any suggestions, anybody's out there, if you're watching it, if you have suggestions for things you want to see, if we didn't go into enough detail on site recovery, we could dive into that, or any aspect. We're looking for we want to do things that are valuable to the community. So that feedback is, I would say, top of the list.
Excellent. You guys did most of my job for me. So next week we'll be on Tuesday. We'll be doing the Americas one, which will also be a more formal webinar. We'll be covering more in depth our M6 release and what's come new on that. Followed by the EMEA week on EMEA office hours on Wednesday, and then the APJ ones on Thursday. So again, we're going to keep trying to keep this format. Again, so like I said, like everybody said, give us all the content. We'll demonstrate it for you. You have any questions, you can make any of those 3 office hours and go ahead and ask us, and we'll discuss it or even demo it for you, any of those kinds of things. And I do really appreciate everybody's time and interest in coming out, and I hope to see everybody next week. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, guys.